Hi, it's me again. And what I want to know is what's happening? What the hell are we all, every one of us, black, white, all races? What are we doing to our Western society? And most importantly, why aren't we trying to stop it? So answer me this. Why do we have police in the United Kingdom kneeling to the Black Lives Matter mob? When authority starts kneeling to the mob rules. The authority of the institutions of law and order has been completely undermined by this action. The demonstrations in London, and I'm sure elsewhere, are infested by violent and angry thugs who have infiltrated the Black Lives Matter movement and who don't even understand just what it is that they're demonstrating about. They think they're demonstrating against racial discrimination. What they are actually doing is demonstrating for racial division. A lot of social justice warriors out there will say that it's a great movement. But is it? What has it become? Do you really believe that Black Lives Matter will bring the races closer together? Do you, white people who support this movement, really think that you're being helpful to racial cohesion? If I were a kinder person, I'd say that if you believe that, you are being naive. But what I really think is that you are a bunch of useful idiots. Black Lives Matter organisers are using your social conscience to help to drive society apart. It's not about equality or justice anymore, it's about supremacism, specifically in this case, black supremacism. Just look at what is happening right now throughout the Western world and take note, this is not happening in the Middle East, it's not happening in the Far East. It can happen in the West because you already have freedoms here that do not exist in authoritarian states like Islamic countries or communist states. And if you in the UK want to demonstrate against racism, stop rioting because a criminal in a country 4,000 miles away was killed by a policeman whilst being arrested. Yes, it was terrible. Yes, it shouldn't have happened. But no, I don't believe it was all about race. It certainly shouldn't have stirred up this much racial hatred. I saw a meme that summed it up. It said, a white man did not kill a black man by putting his knee on his neck. A police officer killed a man by putting his knee on his neck. It shouldn't be about colour. Why are you making this about race? How do you know that the motive behind the police officer's action was racist? I'm not saying it wasn't, but prove it to me. Don't make the assumption. Did he see a black man and decided to kill him? Or did he see a violent criminal high on drugs and was overly brutal in restraining him? And how can I ask this question? Because Dallas police killed Tony Timper, a white man, in exactly the same manner. It's almost as if this is, unofficially at least, standard policy when dealing with violent criminals. I don't know. And I haven't seen the full video of George Floyd being taken to the police car. I don't know if he was fighting back or not. I'm not making these assumptions. All I'm saying is, don't you make assumptions either. When Tony Timper was killed, white people didn't go out into the streets demonstrating about White Lives Matter. And I don't believe in identity politics, so I'm not saying that all police are bad either. That's one of the problems with identity politics. I saw a short video yesterday. I can't reproduce it here because of copyright regulations, but a young woman in London shouted Black Lives Matter at a passing policeman. He quietly replied, but all lives matter. The girl shouted back, no, only Black Lives Matter. Now, if this remark comes from a teenager, then hopefully she'll grow up and realise what she said. But if it comes from an adult, what we are talking about is a genocidal maniac. Anybody that thinks the same thing as her is a genocidal maniac. All lives matter. Do you still think that these demonstrations are bringing us closer together, or are they driving us further apart? And when a black police officer killed a white woman, did that lead to worldwide protests about the oppression of whites? No, it didn't. When whites make a comment like that one, it doesn't mean that we don't agree that what happened was wrong. It doesn't mean that we don't care about black lives. It means that we are fed up as white people of everything focusing on injustice for blacks and nothing being done when the same things and worse happen to whites. In the UK, we only have to look at the grooming gang scandal, where tens of thousands of underage girls were raped and trafficked by predominantly Pakistani Muslims, and the authorities, who knew all about it, turned a blind eye for years for fear of being called racist. And we have a meme going round saying that before Black Lives Matter, no one said all lives matter. Well, duh, there was no need, because apart from those people out there that like to commit murder, it was a given that all lives matter. We didn't need to be told. And the paradox is that blacks are killing blacks in much greater numbers than whites are killing them. That goes for the US and for the UK. The escalating knife crime in Khan's Londonistan is predominantly black kids knifing other black kids. There are an awful lot of bereaved mothers crying over black children, killed by other black children. This is a huge tragedy, but it has nothing to do with racism. This current round of rioting should not be about race, unless it can be shown that the motives behind Floyd's death were racist. They might be, but prove it to me. Whites are more likely to be killed by police in America and in the UK than black people. But incidents like these are used by the left to promote division in society so that they can promise to solve that problem, which they never have done. Don't forget that the slave owners were Democrats, the KKK were Democrats, the Jim Crow laws were Democrat laws. In America, it's all part of the Democrat policy of divide and rule, and in the UK, it's encouraged by the Labour Party because they want to bring down the Conservative pro-Brexit government. This is the problem. The left-wing politicians have hijacked this. Antifa have hijacked this. The thugs are getting involved and completely destroying the whole premise of what you are demonstrating for. They're ruining it for you. You've got a huge opportunity here and it's been lost. We've got a woman waving a poster about being saying that this is round 2 of the Haitian massacre. Now, for those of you who haven't heard of the Haitian massacre, in 1804, ex-slaves in Haiti massacred what was left of the French colonialists. Some 3,000 to 5,000 French people had been killed, and the white population on Haiti was practically eradicated. And this was done with a full sense of justice for what the white man had done to them, because they were slaves. And this is why the myth of currently systemic racism is so very dangerous, because it gives justification to the violence as if it were a revolutionary act against oppression. But what oppression? Is affirmative action in the United States oppressive? In the UK, is the BBC allowing recruitment of non-whites only oppressive to blacks or to whites? In the UK, the police have programs to help applicants get through their examinations, but it is open only to non-whites. Whites can't apply for that. Is this oppression of blacks or of whites? We have Muslim-only housing associations in London, not allowed to have Christian-only, because that would be racist. So is that oppressive to people of colour or to whites? As far as I'm concerned, this picture of this woman waving this poster is just like a neo-Nazi promising to repeat the Holocaust. And it's done because this person believes that she is fighting a righteous battle about oppression, a myth perpetuated by the mainstream media, the left, and, I'm afraid to say, Black Lives Matter. But when white people start to talk about the unfairness of it all, they're called racist and fascist. It seems to me that the whites, who have worked hard in the West to bring about equality and have made tremendous strides in the last 50 years, are now the victims of racism. But it is always the whites who are blamed for all slavery. So where is this getting us? What has it all led to? Well, it has led to ignorant, useful idiots virtue signaling about one man being killed by one police officer just because the man was black, whilst totally ignoring the vicious, racially motivated murders and rapes against white people, such as Chris MacDonald, Safi Roussos, Emily Jones, tens of thousands of groomed white girls, Keith Blakelock, 7/7 victims, 9/11 victims, Aisha Fraid, Leslie Rhodes, Kurt Cochran, Keith Palmer. The list is so long. And apart from 9/11, all those attacks were in the UK. Again, I am not criticising the principle that we should protest against injustice to blacks, But we should also protest against injustice to whites. We should be protesting against all injustice to all people by whoever is perpetrating that injustice. The USA has affirmative action which is unfair to whites and doubly unfair to what Americans call Asians, being the yellow-skinned people. In the UK, to us, Asians means people from the Indian subcontinent. The UK has more specific examples, notably in the police force and the BBC, as I've already mentioned, not to mention the blind eye turned by authorities. We also have black history being taught in universities. One wonders if they include the black slavers who sold their brothers to white slavers, the Barbary pirates from North Africa who enslaved whites for centuries, the slavery that continues to this day in Africa and in Middle Eastern countries, the white genocide that happened in Zimbabwe, and the white genocide that is happening right now, right this minute in South Africa. Do they include black Muslims slaughtering black Christians in Nigeria and other African countries? I am against all forms of unjustified prejudice. But first of all, I will not demean myself by apologizing for a crime I did not commit, just to appease the prejudices of others. Appeasement does no good. Look at 1936 and Hitler if you want to have any proof of what happens about when you appease the tyrants. Secondly, my country, the UK, a white country, was the first country in the world to ban slavery, and it bankrupted its treasury by buying the freedom of every slave in the empire. In the American Civil War, 30 years later, 600,000 white soldiers died to free black slaves. What black countries, you know, the ones that sold the slaves to the transatlantic slavers, how many of them have fought and died to free black slaves? Thirdly, my people, white people, were slaves too. We were enslaved by the Vikings, the Romans, the Barbary pirates, you know, those dark-skinned people from North Africa. And that went on for hundreds of years longer than the transatlantic trade, which was when white slavers bought slaves from black slavers. And a new study suggests that 1 million or more European Christians were enslaved by Muslims in North Africa, who are not white, by the way, between 1530 and 1780, a far greater number than had ever been estimated before. But we whites don't blame all our problems on someone else. We don't blame our problems on the fact that our ancestors were enslaved. We get on and solve our own problems. That's the only way to progress. That's the way that so-called privilege is earned. Finally, the Jews. The Jews are the most vilified and hated people in the world, and yet they win so many Nobel Peace Prizes. They turn a desert into a garden. They build businesses. They don't whine on continually about Jewish lives matter. They don't insist that every school should serve kosher food. They look forward and build. And there are only about 24 million Jews in the whole world, maybe 40 million if you include people who are just connected in some way. The moral here is, if you're black, stop playing the victim. Stop blaming Whitey for all your problems. One of your guys made it to be President of the United States of America, the top job in the world. So it can be done. It is possible. I hear many black people saying, stop whining. Get on and build your lives. Those are black people saying that, not me. I would say I would endorse that. But I've heard so many black activists saying, stop whining. Get on with it. It hasn't done too badly for Oprah Winfrey or Obama or Will Smith, people like that. If you're white and you want to help, then campaign peacefully against prejudice. But don't ever perpetuate the hatred by apologizing for something that you had nothing to do with, and that in the past, black people were as much, if not more, involved in than white people were, and for a much longer time. And it was made illegal in the Western world 150 years ago, but still goes on today in some African countries. Stop apologizing. Get on and do something positive to stop this hatred. And who's getting hurt the most through these riots at the moment, particularly in America? These black people died. Some were protecting the property of businesses of other black people. Black Lives Matter protesters are looting and burning their own communities. They've burnt down the auto store. Now where are you going to go when your car breaks down? They have burnt down Target and other shops. Now black people with no cars have nowhere to shop, and the black people who worked in those shops are out of work. What the hell is wrong with you people? You're burning down your own communities, for goodness sake. And we now have British police kneeling in front of a baying crowd at an illegal gathering during the COVID crisis lockdown period, having earlier expended a great deal of effort in chasing down and humiliating people who were walking their dogs in rural areas away from all the crowds, or trying to get a government advisor sacked because he was making provision for childcare because of sickness in his family, whilst ignoring all the left-wing politicians doing worse. And then we have the absolute stupidity and hypocrisy from the so-called health professionals. In the United States, over 1,200 public health professionals signed an open letter this week supporting the George Floyd protests because white supremacy is a lethal public health issue that predates and contributes to COVID-19. I'm sorry, how does white supremacy, if it exists, lead to COVID-19? These are healthcare officials who have been urging people not to gather in crowds and maintain social distancing. And these so-called health professionals state that they do not condemn these gatherings as risky for COVID-19 transmission. If you put this in a novel, nobody would find it believable. And our police in the UK are victims too, because of identity politics. The police in all over the world, actually, are victims of this. 3 years ago, brave British police officers, and I'm not saying that United States police officers aren't brave either, because they are tremendously brave. They get shot at far more than our police do. But 3 years ago, those British police officers confronted terrorists head on as they murdered 11 innocent victims on London Bridge. A van was deliberately driven into pedestrians on the London Bridge before crashing on the south bank of the River Thames. The terrorists then attempted to stab as many people as possible. 48 innocent people were injured, 21 of them critically, including police officers. The police officers risked their own lives in order to save the lives of complete strangers from all backgrounds. They ran towards a danger that most people run away from. Today, 3 years later, almost to the day, crowds of people in London are shouting, "Fuck the police," in the faces of the same officers who undoubtedly saved people's lives on that day. Bottles are being thrown at the same officers who responded to help Londoners who faced the threat of not just this terrorist incident, but many others. What have these brave police officers done in the last 3 years to warrant such abuse? What have these officers done in the last 3 years in the context of London Bridge and this third anniversary that makes you hate them so much? Just because a police officer 4,000 miles away did something bad, it does not mean that all police officers in the UK are bastards. If you think that, then the next time you're mugged or raped or have a terrorist coming at you, I suggest that you phone a Black Lives Matter activist for help. And this is all facilitated by identity politics, another leftist invention. How often do you hear the pundits saying, "speaking as a gay man," or "speaking as a feminist," or "speaking as a person of colour"? And that means that if one person in your group does something bad, it means that everybody in that group is bad, except for a certain group held out to be victims. In the UK, if you voted for Brexit, you are automatically of lower intelligence, a racist, a fascist, far right, and even a Nazi, which shows how little some people know about their history. If you voted to remain, you are ignorant, uneducated, a traitor to your country. And so the insults continue to flow. And it backfires on the left too. Black Lives Matter supporters are largely peaceful. But there are so many thugs burning, looting and pulling down statues in their name that all Black Lives Matter supporters are now branded as thugs and hooligans. You see how this works? You're not, but you look like you are because of the idiots that have infiltrated your ranks. But identity politics also has a problem. Some people who are members of a particular group, but who demonstrably behave in a manner contrary to that group's prescribed behavior, might make intelligent thinking people question the whole identity politics thing. For example, when Kanye West, I'm not a fan of his, but when Kanye West came out in support of Trump as a black man, he was betraying the group identity. But the left believe that they found a way out of this dilemma. A prominent black writer wrote in a well-known American magazine that Kanye West was no longer black. Yeah, just think about that. He was thrown out of the group because he went against their narrative. He's a black man who is no longer black, according to the left. Peter Thiel, the billionaire co-founder of PayPal, just happens to be gay. When he came out to support the Republican nominee in 2016, he was denounced in the main gay magazine in America as being no longer gay. They said, he may sleep with men, but in no other way is he gay. I'm sorry. He was excommunicated by the gay community for not being gay because apparently sleeping with men does not make you gay if you vote Republican. And when Germaine Greer, the world's most prominent feminist of the late 20th century, refused to say that trans women were women, she was denounced as no longer being a feminist and was deplatformed in all the universities in the UK and in America. These three cases show how identity politics is just naked politics. A black man can't be black because he disagrees with the left. An openly and demonstrably gay man can't be gay because he votes for the Republicans. The most prominent feminist of our times can't be a feminist because she disagrees with the left-wing transgender lobby. These idiotic denunciations might fool the virtue-signaling useful idiots of the left, but any intelligent thinking person sees right through them as just being political propaganda and a way of keeping the group clean. A bit like fascism, don't you think? And it seems that the Black Lives Matter movement is supporting fascism. Here's an article from the Allgemeine. In a recently issued platform, more than 60 groups that form the core of the Black Lives Matter movement went out of their way to single out one foreign nation to accuse of genocide and apartheid. No, it wasn't the Syrian government, which has killed tens of thousands of innocent people with barrel bombs, chemicals and gas. Nor was it Saudi Arabia, which openly practices gender and religious apartheid. It wasn't Iran, which hangs gays and murders dissidents. It wasn't China, which has occupied Tibet for more than half a century. And it wasn't Turkey, which has imprisoned journalists, judges and academics. And finally, it wasn't any of the many countries such as Venezuela or Mexico where police abuses against innocent people run rampant and largely unchecked. Nor was it the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip, where the police are a law unto themselves who act as judge, jury and executioner of those whose politics or religious practices they disapprove. It was only Israel, the nation-state of the Jewish people and the only democracy in the Middle East. That sounds like Nazi propaganda to me. It seems to me that these Black Lives Matter protests have nothing to do with racism. They are now a political action designed to damage Trump's election and to attempt to bring down the pro-Brexit Conservative government in the UK. The British, in particular, are the champions of freedom and equality, and we have been for decades. And America also is one of the most diverse nations in the world. To have thousands of people out protesting on the streets during a pandemic about a death caused by a police force in a country 4,000 miles away is just utterly wrong, and it does nothing but divide us further. Martin Luther King famously said, "Returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars." Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And whilst our societies are tearing themselves apart in a civil war fomented by the left using identity politics as an important part of their arsenal, there is a predator waiting patiently on the sidelines, willing to use those same useful idiots, those same kneeling police officers, the same acquiescent government frightened to be called racist, the same weapon of identity politics, to move in, pick up the pieces, and replace our democracy with their own oppressive form of government. But that's another story. See ya.